Suppose the world has fallen to a zombie plague. Cities burn, governments collapse, and the living fight desperately against endless hordes of the undead. Where would you want to be? Canada or United States? While Hollywood often depicts Americans as the ultimate survivors, armed to the teeth and ready for battle, the harsh reality of a zombie apocalypse suggests a different outcome. Canada, with its vast wilderness, sparse population, and strategic advantages, would likely emerge as the last bastion of human civilization in North America. The zombie apocalypse isn't just about who has the most guns or the strongest military. It's about sustainable survival in a world where every living person could become your enemy. When we examine the fundamental factors that determine long-term survival against an undead plague, Canada's unique geographical and demographic characteristics position it as the superior choice for weathering humanity's darkest hour.
The most critical factor in zombie survival isn't firepower, it's avoiding zombies altogether. According to survival experts and zombie research, population density becomes humanity's greatest enemy when the dead rise. Canada's population density of just 10.2 people per square mile, compared to the United States' 87 people per square mile, creates a fundamental survival advantage that cannot be overstated. In the United States, major metropolitan areas like New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago would become death traps within hours of an outbreak. With over 8.3 million people crammed into New York City alone, the sheer number of potential zombies would create an unstoppable wave of infection. Even smaller American cities would face overwhelming odds. A mid-sized city of 100,000 people could theoretically produce 100,000 zombies, creating a horde that no amount of civilian firepower could effectively combat. Canada's population distribution tells a dramatically different story. With 38 million people spread across the world's second largest country, the vast majority of Canadian territory remains virtually uninhabited. The Northern Territories, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut cover over 3.9 million square kilometers, but house fewer than 120,000 people combined. This means that in a zombie outbreak, survivors could retreat to areas where they might not encounter another human being, living or dead, for hundreds of miles. The mathematics of zombie proliferation work against densely populated areas. Research on zombie apocalypse scenarios suggests that infection rates follow exponential growth patterns in urban environments. A single zombie in Manhattan could theoretically infect dozens of people within hours, each of whom becomes a new vector for the plague. In contrast, a zombie wandering the Canadian wilderness might never encounter another human being, effectively ending that particular chain of infection.
Canada's Northern Territories offer something that no other major nation can provide: a natural zombie-killing environment. The extreme cold of the Canadian Arctic creates conditions that would be lethal to zombies, while remaining survivable for properly prepared humans. Survival analysis indicates that the Northwest Territories rank among the safest places on Earth during a zombie apocalypse, largely due to their harsh climate and minimal population. Winter temperatures in northern Canada regularly drop below -40 degrees Celsius, -40 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze human tissue solid. While the exact physiology of zombies remains theoretical, any reanimated corpse would likely lack the circulatory system necessary to maintain body heat. This means that zombies caught in a Canadian winter would literally freeze solid, becoming immobile ice sculptures until spring, if they survive the freeze-thaw cycle at all. The psychological advantage of winter cannot be understated. While zombies would be slowed or stopped entirely by extreme cold, human survivors with proper shelter, clothing, and heating could remain active and mobile. Indigenous communities across northern Canada have survived in these conditions for thousands of years, possessing invaluable knowledge about cold weather survival, hunting, and resource management that would prove crucial in a post-apocalyptic world. Furthermore, the seasonal nature of Canadian winters creates natural reset periods. Even if zombie hordes manage to penetrate into Canadian territory during summer months, the arrival of winter would effectively clear the landscape, giving survivors time to regroup, resupply, and plan for the following year. While the United States is famous for its gun culture, Canada's firearm ownership rates are more substantial than many realize, and more importantly, better suited for zombie apocalypse scenarios. Canada has approximately 12.6 million firearms among its 38 million citizens, roughly one gun for every 3 people. While this is lower than American rates, it's distributed among a population that's more likely to have practical shooting experience. Canadian gun owners are predominantly hunters and rural residents who use firearms for practical purposes rather than sport or collection. This means Canadian gun owners are more likely to be proficient with rifles and shotguns, exactly the types of weapons most effective against zombies. The typical Canadian firearm owner knows how to maintain their weapons, conserve ammunition, and make accurate shots under pressure, skills that would be invaluable when every bullet counts. Moreover, Canada's gun culture emphasizes responsibility and training. Canadian firearms licensing requires safety courses and background checks, meaning that armed Canadians are more likely to be disciplined, trained shooters, rather than enthusiastic amateurs. In a zombie apocalypse, the difference between a trained marksman and an untrained gun owner could mean the difference between survival and becoming zombie food. The distribution of firearms across Canada's rural areas also creates a strategic advantage. Rather than having weapons concentrated in urban areas that would quickly fall to zombie hordes, Canadian firearms are spread across the countryside, exactly where survivors would need them most. The United States' apparent advantages in a zombie apocalypse, massive military power, extensive gun ownership, and advanced medical research capabilities, could actually work against long-term survival. The US military, while formidable against human enemies, would face unique challenges against zombie hordes that don't respond to conventional warfare tactics. Military analysis of zombie scenarios suggests that traditional military strategies become less effective against enemies that feel no fear, require no supply lines, and can only be stopped by destroying the brain. The US military's emphasis on overwhelming firepower and technological superiority becomes less relevant when facing an enemy that can absorb tremendous damage and keep advancing. The high population density that supports America's military-industrial complex becomes a liability when that population becomes infected. Major military installations are typically located near population centers to facilitate recruitment, supply, and support. In a zombie outbreak, these same population centers would become sources of infection that could overwhelm even well-defended military bases. America's gun ownership, while extensive, is concentrated in areas that would be difficult to defend. Urban gun owners would face the impossible task of fighting their way out of zombie-infested cities, while rural gun owners would be overwhelmed by refugees fleeing urban areas, some of whom might be infected. The psychological factor cannot be ignored either. Americans are accustomed to winning through superior firepower and technology. When these advantages prove insufficient against zombie hordes, the psychological impact could be devastating, leading to panic, poor decision-making, and social collapse. In any post-apocalyptic scenario, the greatest threat to survivors often comes not from zombies, but from other humans. Desperate people do desperate things, and when resources become scarce, ordinary citizens can transform into raiders, bandits, and worse. This human element adds another layer of complexity to zombie apocalypse survival. And once again, Canada's unique characteristics provide significant advantages. Research on post-apocalyptic human behavior suggests that raider groups typically emerge in areas with moderate zombie activity, dangerous enough to thin out the population, but not so dangerous that human movement becomes impossible. These groups prey on weaker survivors, taking their resources, weapons, and supplies through violence and intimidation. In the United States, the combination of high population density and widespread gun ownership would create ideal conditions for raider groups to emerge. Desperate urban refugees fleeing zombie-infested cities would encounter armed rural communities, creating inevitable conflicts over resources. The American cultural emphasis on individual rights and property protection could lead to a shoot first, ask questions later mentality that would make cooperation between survivor groups extremely difficult. Canada's sparse population and harsh environment would naturally limit the formation and effectiveness of raider groups. The vast distances between settlements would make raiding expeditions logistically challenging and dangerous. A raider group operating in northern Canada would need to carry enough supplies to survive potentially weeks of travel through hostile wilderness, all while avoiding both zombies and the elements. The Canadian cultural emphasis on community cooperation and mutual aid would also work against raider mentality. Canadian communities have a long history of working together to survive harsh conditions, from prairie farming cooperatives to northern Indigenous communities. This cultural foundation would be invaluable in maintaining social cohesion during a zombie apocalypse. Furthermore, the seasonal nature of Canadian survival would make raiding less attractive. During winter months, when travel becomes extremely dangerous and resources are most scarce, raider groups would be forced to hunker down and survive on their own supplies.
This would limit their operational window and make them more vulnerable to counterattacks from organized survivor communities. And when it comes to long-term survival in a zombie apocalypse, depends not just on avoiding zombies and hostile humans, but on maintaining access to essential resources: food, water, shelter, fuel, and medical supplies. Canada's natural abundance and infrastructure distribution create significant advantages in resource management. Canada's vast wilderness provides abundant opportunities for hunting, fishing, and foraging. The country's forests, lakes, and rivers could support survivor communities indefinitely, provided they have the knowledge and skills to exploit these resources. Many Canadians, particularly in rural and northern communities, already possess these skills through hunting, fishing, and outdoor recreation traditions. Water access is particularly crucial in post-apocalyptic scenarios. Canada contains approximately 20% of the world's fresh water, with countless lakes, rivers, and streams throughout the country. This abundance means that Canadian survivors would rarely face the water scarcity issues that could plague survivors in more arid regions. The distribution of Canada's infrastructure also favors long-term survival. Rather than having resources concentrated in major urban centers, Canadian infrastructure is spread across numerous small towns and rural communities. This distributed network would be more resilient to zombie outbreaks and would provide multiple fallback positions for survivor communities. While Canada's harsh climate provides advantages against zombies, it also presents significant challenges for human survivors. However, these challenges are not insurmountable, and Canadians are uniquely prepared to face them. Canadians are culturally and practically adapted to cold weather survival. From childhood, Canadians learn to dress appropriately for extreme cold, maintain heating systems, and prepare for winter emergencies. This cultural knowledge base would be invaluable in a post-apocalyptic scenario where modern heating and infrastructure might be compromised. The seasonal nature of Canadian climate also creates natural planning cycles. Survivors would need to prepare for winter during summer months, gathering supplies, preserving food, and ensuring adequate shelter. This seasonal rhythm would impose discipline and long-term thinking that could be crucial for survival. Indigenous communities across Canada possess thousands of years of experience surviving in harsh northern climates without modern technology. This traditional knowledge, including techniques for hunting, food preservation, shelter construction, and navigation, would become invaluable in a post-apocalyptic world. When we examine all factors, population density, climate, resources, culture, and strategic advantages, Canada emerges as the clear winner in a North American zombie apocalypse scenario. While the United States might have superior firepower and military capabilities, these advantages become liabilities when facing an enemy that cannot be deterred or negotiated with. Canada's vast, sparsely populated northern territories would provide refuge for survivors long after American cities had fallen to zombie hordes. The harsh Canadian winter would serve as a natural ally, freezing zombies solid while allowing prepared humans to survive and thrive. The country's abundant natural resources, distributed infrastructure, and culture of cooperation would support survivor communities for generations. Most importantly, Canada offers something that no amount of firepower can provide: space. In a zombie apocalypse, the ability to avoid contact with both zombies and hostile humans becomes the ultimate survival strategy.
Canada's 10 million square kilometers of territory, much of it virtually uninhabited, would allow survivor communities to establish themselves in locations where they might never encounter another zombie. The zombie apocalypse would not be won through dramatic last stands or heroic battles. It would be won through patience, preparation, and the wisdom to choose the right place to make humanity's final stand. In that scenario, the Great White North would truly become humanity's last, best hope for survival. When the dead rise and civilization falls, remember this: it's not about who fights the hardest, it's about who's still standing when the fighting ends. And in the frozen wilderness of northern Canada, surrounded by vast distances and protected by nature's own defenses, the last survivors of humanity would finally be safe to begin again. Also, if you stuck with me this far, like and subscribe. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.